Have you ever been in this situation? You're excited for the release of a game, basically counting down the days until it comes out. Trailers have dropped and you can't wait to finally see what all the hype is about. Maybe you decide to leave work 30 minutes early or skip dinner just to grab a copy. After you buy it, you're on your way home, you're so excited, and then you open the door to your place before you can even sit down, and you remember, I didn't put the dishes away from last night, or the laundry needs to be done, or you have to feed your coworker's cat because he's out of town. Maybe a friend or a family member gives you a call asking if you want to go out that night because it's Friday and you've spent your whole week working. You acquiesce and put aside the game for a moment to do whatever has grabbed your attention. It'll only be a little bit anyways, so the game isn't going anywhere. Fast forward almost 2 years, and you still haven't played Fire Emblem Engage. I've had a pretty strange but totally understandable relationship with single-player games in particular. The very first video I ever put on this channel was about my top 10 favorite video games, and while I want to recreate that video in some capacity, looking back on it, I realized most of them were single-player games. The top 5, while the order may have switched around, remain the same, and they're all primarily single-player. And it's truly because I recognize there's something inherently inspiring about the craft that goes into making single-player story-driven experiences. I love these games with a passion. I would say with a passion that is fairly intense because once I start playing, I don't want to stop until I've beaten it or taken all of the side quests. Yet within the past few years, the number of games I've been playing has dramatically decreased. This year especially, I could list off of a single hand probably all the new games I've played. And by new, I don't mean new as in coming out recently, I mean just new to me. And I've really thought about why my gaming experience in the past few years has changed. It's difficult to admit because, like I said, I love single-player games so much, but really, I've moved into playing games with other people, unless I want to make video essays about them for the purpose of this channel. So I've been allocating my time in different ways than before. I guess you could say it started after university. Even in the midst of writing my master's thesis, I was still able to make time for games that I liked, and even games that I didn't like. A great example is I had the chance to play The Last of Us Part 2, a game that I really dislike for a myriad of reasons, twice. On the university schedule, one is able to contort classwork, relationships, and gaming much easier than in the real world. But then, I graduated and was introduced to the prospect of a 9-to-5 or something potentially longer. So obviously, as I established myself as an adult, especially after the many changes in my personal life over the past year, things have been fairly busy on my end. And I'll explain some of those things closer to the end of the video, but I'm more interested in this feeling about why I'm moving away from single-player games. It's not all that life is just busy. Games feel longer. I think by and large we have plenty of data to show that games are becoming larger, but the mass consumption of seed oils doesn't have any correlation to the obesity of these games. Larger budgets, larger file sizes, and larger prices with perpetual battle passes. Graphical fidelity isn't the only thing leading to a larger file size for games. One could say mediocrity. Many games are getting bloated to the point where only one will fit on your system at a time. But in a way, I think publishers are tacitly okay with that because it limits the amount of other games a consumer could be playing. Now, the file size issue is something that affects multiplayer games to a greater degree than single-player games, when you're comparing performance metrics against other players and such. But the actual length of single-player games has drastically increased as well, especially in recent years. For a good visualization, I looked at the average length of video games over the last 25 years based on Game of the Year results. Showing aside from a few classics by Nintendo in the late 90s and 2000s, games from the early 2000s were relatively condensed in size and scope. Part of this was hardware limitation, but having played many of these games, they're pretty perfectly paced. They last as long as they need to tell the story they're trying to tell, and they do it well. As the hardware improves, games get slightly longer, in many ways to exploit the new processing power and give players more unique gameplay experiences. There are obviously some outliers during this period, but it typically follows the trend that most Western games averaged under 20 hours. But games from the East always tended to be longer, with more satisfying gameplay loops. Then by 2020, the average length of games just explodes to a ridiculous degree, to the point where games like Baldur's Gate 3 take, on average, 75 hours to complete. It's interesting to me to see the sudden increase occurs during the COVID shutdowns, when many people had more time to play video games. However, the world is more or less continuing continuing, and most people don't have the same level of disposable free time that they did during the lockdowns, or more accurately, while they were blowing off remote work. I just don't have the time to play Elden Ring or Red Dead 2, let alone the myriad of Japanese games like Persona, SMT, and Fire Emblem. So, do games really have to be this long? This is something I've been contemplating for a while. What is the ideal length of a video game? You may think that since the prices of games have weathered inflation pretty well, it should be better bang for your buck to have longer games for roughly the same price over the years. But I think this isn't as great as it initially seems, because games are just filling the hours with either needless grinding or backtracking content. JRPGs are pretty notorious for their grinding curves, but the gameplay loop in something like Pokemon can be a lot of fun, where I just feel Western games fill their gameplay loops with walking disguised as storytelling. This is why I honestly prefer games that are in the 15 to 20 hour average completion time for the base story. However, if there are some achievements or extra details you want to find, double or triple that length would probably be good bounds to stay in. But there is a market force that's keeping games longer than that 15 to 20 hours, and that's the push towards the open world model. This model of single player storytelling can be fun and engaging because it gives the player a sense of freedom. But in a way, I also think it harms games too. Firstly, you have the problem of many games just cashing in on it before they're truly ready to implement it. Look no further than Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, a fun and enjoyable experience that could potentially be ruined by game-breaking glitches. I still liked it despite that, though. However, I acknowledge that it took much longer to complete than any other Pokemon game I could think of. Then you have these open-world models being filled with trivial items, assets, or enemy types that really don't affect storytelling in a positive way. If I'm going to wander around somewhere aimlessly, I'd rather be talking to my friends while doing it. By letting every player tackle the game at their own pace, it hinders the story's pacing to the point where people may be more inclined to look up guides just to get through the game. I know I've been there myself. And this gets me to the point that I wanted to talk about with this video. I absolutely love games, especially the ones that say, do these 10 million steps to unlock the super best weapon and rare support conversation variety. As much as I hate doing those tasks, something in my brain still wants to do them. The problem I have is I love games so much that I've been refusing to buy them because of how much I love them. There's something psychological going on in my brain that even if I don't want to be 100% completionist, I still like to make my favorite characters as powerful as possible. And when I get a game, especially a single player one, I lock in. Next thing I know, it's 3 a.m. and I have work in the morning. This happens most frequently with some of the more challenging types of games. Some examples that come to mind would be Dark Souls, Cuphead, or Metroid Dread. These games, in theory, are relatively short. However, since I'm not used to the playstyle, they took up hours of mastery until I finally beat them. So I'm in this unfortunate position of having to say no to games that I could potentially love because I can't justify spending more time on them. And this could be a part of the fact that I've just aged out of the target demographic. I was pretty introverted throughout high school and college, but now I find myself out more with my friends and family and community. I've adopted a pretty Asian style of work-life balance, the work hard, play hard mentality. And when you're being compensated for all those hours you work, it makes the experience of doing overtime much more bearable. At this current moment, I don't have time for video games. So if that's the case, what have I been filling my time with? Well, to start, I've been picking up a lot of new skills. I just started taking Korean and Italian language classes to better help me communicate at work. I just finished a book club where we went through the entire Iliad with many well-read philosophers, Greek literature professors, and guys who work at think tanks to talk about old dusty books. This in addition to 100 Days of Dante, which I've been enjoying. I've revolutionized my prayer life and service to the community with the traditional Latin Mass and the Knights of Columbus. I always make sure to run a 5K twice a week, and this led me to complete my first Spartan race, just like my ancestors would have wanted me to. All's to say is, I've been a little busy outside the full-time job and the YouTube grind. And when I think about the placement of games, especially single-player games, in my ever-decreasing free time, I just don't have it in me anymore. I've realized that I've moved into a different phase of life, so they just won't be as much of a part of it. This doesn't mean I haven't been gaming, though. Buddies from college and I have been going through the Call of Duty Zombies and Left 4 Dead dead maps with each other just to catch up. Jack DeRipper of YouTube Poop fame, and I have been spreading democracy in Helldivers 2.
Learn how to vault those walls, boy.
I'm vaulting. I can slide?
Yeah.
Can I slide? Oh!
You can slide, boy.
Alt to dive to prone. Oh, like that. Okay.
You know, like PhD flopper.
Like flopper. Okay, I got this.
Yeah.
Oh! Why?
Limo. Got him.
Why?
They always get you with the stands
always
up on
get 'em.
sprint.
I've almost exclusively been playing games in social events or experiences. Whenever I have people over at my apartment for dinner, you will bet that Mario Kart and or Smash Bros will be broken out on the Switch. There's just something so satisfying about sharing the experience of playing games together with friends that makes a huge difference. And it even extends to watching people play single-player games together. I know, as rare as that might be, it's part of the reason why, you know, maybe I wouldn't watch anyone on Twitch because I don't have that human-to-human connection with them. But if one of my friends is playing BioShock for the first time, you bet I will be there the entire time. So going forward, when I play single-player games, it'll be for the express intention of making something about it on this channel. I play games because I enjoy them, but I live a pretty hectic life at times, and I really can't justify spending dozens of hours on a game that I might not even like. However, if I don't like it, I could talk about it here. And then you have the time investment to write and make videos, and it just becomes something greater, but that's a very me problem right now. I'm always motivated to be doing something productive with my time, so my leisure is usually spent in books or playing songs on the piano. It's a curse to have a lot of hobbies and no time to do them. But just because I don't have time to play games doesn't mean I don't want to talk about them, as I've just come up with a few revelations for games that I like and dislike throughout the process of making this video. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications to see those coming up very soon. I love making these videos for you guys. Maybe one day I will actually play Fire Emblem Engage, but until then, thank you for watching, God bless, and I will see you all next time.